Do you have any memory of the first time you heard Noguchi's name or the context in which you learned about Noguchi? Or
Yeah, I mean, as I was racking my brain, obviously since all this, I was thinking the first time was a friend of mine here in New York whose home I visited and had a lamp. And I said, wow, that's beautiful. Like, and he said, oh, that's Noguchi, Akari lamp. So that was it. And then, you know, after that, I would either see them around. Even other shops were using them as just a lamp in their store or something, for example. And then another one of my friends, one of my Japanese friends, had a beautiful one hanging from the ceiling. So that's the first time I'd ever heard of it. And then later, at some point, I was somewhere in a bookshop in Japan, in Tokyo, and had looked at a few of his books that someone had told me I should have a look at. So, but that's going back to the late 90s, early 00s, you know.
Right.
So to have this thing happening obviously was quite, you know, I was very honored to be able to work with you guys here and in this space. But just to finally think about how that came around from not knowing about something to ultimately later in life I get to work on his it's like a collaboration of creativity.
You've seen a lot of high-end retail. And
Sure.
the amazing thing about Akari is that they in a way are to those kinds of retail environments the way your work is in the world and in spaces too, where they're like that little explosion of something different.
Yes.
That just gives it a,
Well,
does
I mean,
that
you know,
sound?
yeah, I mean, I guess because the thing is, like, I didn't even know, you know, obviously once we were asked to work on this show, you know, I wanted to know more about Noguchi-san's history and contributions. And, you know, so for me, I think it's, yeah, I mean, oh, and remember we mentioned that we shared the same birthday, which
That's
I thought
right.
was actually quite interesting, November 17. But just to find some parallels maybe in what we've been doing, has been interesting.
well, and wanting to push art out into the world and not really having any clean distinction between working in the gallery and working in the universe proper, you know?
Sure, in the public space?
There's in public
Yeah.
space, there's so much in common there.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the first thing that you used as a canvas? What was the first thing that you painted on?
Probably wasn't even a canvas in a sense of traditional.
Right, I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Canvas in air quotes. Like, what was the
Yeah,
first?
it may have been a piece of wood even, you know, I mean, because I don't think in the very beginning when I started making artwork, I, you know, had the resources for really quality artist materials.
Of course.
And a lot of us were using found objects as a means to gain material. And
So
that could be
construction fence,
yeah, I mean,
just
you
whatever.
could just find stuff anywhere, certainly wood, glass, doors, windows, you know, which could be, the glass could be removed and now you've got this frame. Even ornate type frames that people were just dumping out. You know, there's always like a day of the week that everybody's throwing their trash away. And I remember we used to run around scavenging for things that we thought could be painted or in some sense of other, you know, sculptor type people looking to cannibalize things and make stuff, you know, out of found objects. But yeah, I mean, canvas, you know, obviously metal. I would say metal is my favorite medium as a spray painter, if only because of the way the application to the material.
Because it goes down so smooth?
It's just amazing, yeah. I mean, not even like a canvas per se that would have a primer and gesso, and yeah, it's gonna land on there fine. But something about metal, it just kind of loves metal, yeah.
Maybe one thing that was really interesting as you were starting to play with the lanterns and figure out, could you just talk like technically a little bit about how well they take paint or how you thought about applying the paint or what you were worried about and trying to figure out as you were working on them?
I was worried that the paint might be aggressive and, you know, might tear out the actual material that the lamps are made of. So one way to avoid that was to use an acrylic-based spray paint, which I did on these. And of course, all the lamps are unique. So in how they folded, which they all actually folded, and how I could paint them, each one was a kind of maybe a different technique or process, I guess. But I most enjoyed, I keep calling it the Michelin Man, but
yeah, the Michelin is a great nickname for that.
I most enjoyed him, of course. And, you know, there's just something, I mean, even these three together, to me, it's all about the shapes, obviously. And I don't know, I see fruit, I see, well, this one I look and I see a candle, and you know what I mean? There's just stuff you see. And I was going to say this one was my favorite, if only in a sense too, of the images that you had showed me of a previous exhibition from like 50 years ago where some other artist had gone at this particular lamp. And yeah, but I mean, you know, I really enjoyed this process.
I think that maybe was Roberto Mata.
So that's a crazy thing with Mata, because I was in a show 8 years ago, myself, Mata, another artist named Phase 2, who, rest in peace, he had passed away a few years ago. But yeah, there was something about Mata's work, and even as seen in that artwork 50 years ago, he had these kind of wild things happening, and I don't know if he was, did he use spray paint even as early as that era? But there was some correlation that people were trying to associate him as a kind of forerunner-ish, maybe, to what we were doing. But yeah, Mata, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if
that's a crazy circle that it winds up being him, because I did touch him in some other way with this group show. Although obviously he's also gone, and we were working, I think, with the institution in some capacity. We had some work in the show, but yeah, Mata, I like him. And you know, it's also part of the whole South American mural, like all of that kind of muralism that came out of the South America.
Another thing about, so he and Noguchi were friendly.
Wow,
Noguchi
okay.
and the sort of surrealist circle that moved to New York in the 40s, Noguchi was part of. And those guys, the ones that he kind of was drawn to were the outsiders.
Yes,
you know, never quite felt right at home. Wilfredo Lam is another one from the Caribbean. You know, I'm just curious your sense of sort of being inside or outside, or how you've thought about your own place.
You know, comfortably, you know, kind of balancing within both, right? Because
bridging.
Yeah, well, I mean, being inside means you're still kind of quasi-connected to the others who are involved in the culture and the movement, and haven't just left it, let's say, and left everyone to their own devices. And I've always felt like whatever I've been doing as a pathfinder, as someone who can get out there in advance of everyone, maybe open a door, maybe blaze a trail, maybe mark a trail, and it may enable others to follow, and or the relationships I've been making in my quest could help other individuals as well, who kind of come from the lineage or the whatever of. But what you were saying about the outsiders, I mean, we've always been perceived, even from the beginning, I feel, as being outsiders. We've made great gains in becoming much more popularized, and I think we were accepted now, whereas there was a moment in our stories where we weren't automatically accepted. You know, there were few people who were interested in what we were doing. But
in the art world.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, you know, those things are always generational. And at 65 now, you know, I'm the recipient almost even of that generational change, not just in the individuals involved, but in the kind of growth of the culture at large, and how someone like a Basquiat, you know, who passed away 30 years ago, more, can still have such a legacy, I think, in the history of who we are. And all I'm doing is, you know, standing on the shoulders of some other individuals and hoping through time, you know, I can, you know, I sort of always want to do my part for the team in a way as well.
What language do you like, or what terms do you like to use for the kind of painting that group of artists did back then and what you're doing now?
Well, I mean, I call it,
the terminology is pretty loaded, or there's some people who have a real...
There's so much language, and, you know, I was never one for the actual term graffiti artist, you know, although there was a time when I totally lived there, you know, graffiti writer, graffiti artist. Now it's like a kind of street art. You know, there's all these connotations, what have you. I mean, I just see myself as, I'm a creative individual, and I just happen to come from that subway school. I wound up being a bit more abstract and different, but I always thought that was the whole point of living our lives, to become.
Always becoming.
Yeah, and like kind of, but like, you underscore your individualism in some way, and however that happens, you know, and how people gain whatever reputation they have based on their production, their whatever, their creativity. But in the end, I'm pragmatic. You know, I'm pretty much trying to look at reality and make decisions accordingly.
Do you think it's true that the more you love the world, because one of the things that really strikes me about you is you come across as such a global citizen, you know, sort of embracing and loving the whole world?
I do.
Do you think it's true that the more you feel that way, the less interested you are in labels, just generally speaking?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you know, when you're young, labels seemingly are quite heavy. And, you know, I think now at this point, I was always sure I don't want to be defined by what that label is. You know, oh, hey, you're wearing this brand. Look, that's the label. But as it applies to individuals and who they are and what they do, yeah, I'm above description, really, you know, because whatever it is, however you're going to kind of confine me, pigeonhole me, you know, sort of place me in this folder, well, that's only 1% or a very small percentage of the type of person I really am. Because, you know, I embrace my identity, sure, I'm Futura, you know, but I'm also Lenny, you know, and then I know how to let one go and just have fun being the other. And
or the patch you're wearing today is FUTURA2000.
Yeah, that's my identity on, you know, IG and of course, but just to say that I could easily not be talking to you here in the museum about my work, and we could be somewhere completely different, just having a chat about world history or, you know, anything, the pandemic at the moment. But just to say that, like, I try to balance my life now because, you know, the life of an artist, and mine in particular, has been amazing and like a blessing. But I never let it overwhelm me to the point where, you know, I would, you know, I just always feel grateful. Every day I wake up, I'm like, wow, you know, I kind of get to be me again for another day, and I just want my interactions to be awesome and, you know, meet new people and come away, maybe them thinking like, oh, he's a pretty cool guy, you know, and that's about all I can do, right? You know, and then, yeah, I can get on with the painting and the creativity part, and obviously, you know, people have been very supporting, so not just like you guys in the institution here, but, you know, subsequent events I'm going to do this year, even in the moment we're in, things have been staggered, but I have some shows coming up that I'm really excited about, so, you know, we just see what happens, but despite the conditions of the world, we did pull this amazing show off, and, you know, and I was so happy for that because, you know, this kind of rolled off of the exhibition that I was having in the city, but the fact that you've extended this, and when you say 4, 5, 6 months, I'm like, wow, that's, I think only the conditions of the pandemic and where we are would have even allowed that. You know, yeah. Otherwise it's just scheduling as usual.
That's true.
This would have been over. So, good fortune. Should we swing over and, yeah, no, we were talking about this guy, and whatever, still, I still like this guy too, though, just as a, I mean, he's kind of so simple, and
the crinkle work is so nice.
Crinkle cut, I guess, or crinkles, yeah, just make up silly names for stuff.
There's a funny bit of advertising copy in an Akari brochure from like 1979.
Okay.
And it says, don't worry if they're wrinkled, because they're more beautiful that way.
Well, interesting.
Maybe let's just look at a painting, because I think one of the amazing things that happened in putting this show together is that a friend of yours was willing to loan this.
Yeah, name Cause.
Name Cause.
Yeah, thanks Cause. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, this is a painting we figured out. It's from 1985, which I can just say that's 35, 36 years ago. And yeah, it's called El Diablo. I hope I got that right.
Who was El Diablo in your pantheon?
Well, he was just, because it's funny, I was going to say before, like I wasn't very figurative. Although I was always kind of doing robotic type shapes, I never was really going for anything of personage or, oh, hey, that's a face of someone, obviously. But no, El Diablo was this, you know how you always had the, you know, the devil and the angel. You know,
yes.
It's like the duality inside of us and like the good and the evil. And so I think I had a few pieces called El Diablo. I had a few El Diablos. One was this and one was another drawing that I did of a different character. But I don't know, I just, you know, was always aware of...
What was your version of the devil telling you to do?
Telling me
In
to
those
do
days.
what people were telling me not to do. You know, he was always encouraging me to do bad stuff.
Right.
So in the end, you know, I think I realized, like, you know, I don't need a double, I don't need an angel, I just need someone in the middle that can make clear decisions, you know, based on, you know, whatever reality. Once again, I try to just keep things real in my head and, you know. However.
When you're kind of coming up with your vocabulary of shapes and characters and colors and things, were you thinking about them being either in the world and on the move? And was it weird at all to then try to adapt that to doing gallery painting? Or how did you think about making, well, there's a beautiful phrase of Noguchi's. He said that he didn't want to make art in the context, or what he called the false horizon of the museum pedestal.
Oh, wow.
You know, he didn't like the idea that the museum or a rich person's house is a kind of a universe separated from the real world.
No doubt. I mean, whether it's that institution, I guess he spoke of, or someone who could afford to purchase or whatever, you know, have work in the home of such value. I mean, in the beginning, too, I used to think, like, wow, I don't know if someone's home is necessarily, you know, the landing spot for stuff. And so it was a bit of a, you know, grappling with, well, what do you do now that you're in the gallery and people are selling it? You know, are you being elitist and is it taking away from other stuff? And essentially, you know, in the end, I guess the debate is public art will always win because, you know, things should be, you know, and whether that means, hey, I make art, but it finds its life in the public space, i.e. parks and other places worldwide where individuals can openly see it. You know,
but like a t-shirt counts as public art.
Yeah, I mean, t-shirts are, and in the 90s when I abandoned the gallery system, I guess, I was all out there in streetwear and trying to make graphics and stuff like that. And, you know, even now today, as a kind of a sidebar, I don't want to say side hustle, but, you know, I have a Futura Laboratories brand, you know, that's essentially, you know, I can make hoodies, tees, you know, kind of very simple accessories, I think, that are just lend themselves to, you know, everyday life.
We were talking before about your identity being Futura and being Lenny, and what is it like to be a brand? Is that a strange thing?
No,
or how
I mean,
do you think
well,
about
yeah,
it?
because in the end, I mean, like, I am kind of the brand, you know, it's just not like, you know, luckily in a way, I think also I'm able to, you know, yeah, I have a clothing company, if you will. I have a label, put my label on my clothing, but then it's always me that stands behind that. And, you know, what started out as like, oh, it'd be cool to just, hey, let's screen our own shirts, you know, like in somebody's garage, to, you know, full production of a line or of a season, you know, of 2 drops a year, you know, whatever the scheduling is on the stuff you're making. But I mean, I like having the brand because essentially I can live in both of those places of a sense of like, yeah, I can have an exhibition, but I can still have kind of affordable things for everyday folk. And, you know, it's just part of the, I think to me too, it's still part of pushing my identity out there that, you know, I can do this, I can do that, I can take a photograph, I can 3D print something, I can 2D print, you know, I like, whatever. I don't feel like I'm strapped for ideas and or possibilities, because people are just doing everything right now, you know, and everything is seemingly more, it's not a question of affordable, but possible. Because I always say, if you can't do it, you need to find partners and team up with other folks where collectively you can all make something happen as a group.
One of the things I really noticed, because we talked about it a fair bit, like I remember talking about this lantern, and you wanted to leave Noguchi's signature.
Yes, of course.
So you left this panel blank so that it would still be legible.
Yes, I consciously did that because at the same time it's like, well, that's the last thing I'm going to do is like remove his name from his lamp. So yeah, it was just a question of this one panel which had the tag or his logo. You know, I wanted to keep that pure and, you know, once again, everyone had a kind of a formula to it.
Right.
Well, I said before, like I was calling this one the candle. I was also calling this one the beehive. And, you know, once again, I mean, if it would have been, you know, whatever color you painted, I think that can bring your idea closer to what you're trying to express.
The reason I asked you that question about branding is because one thing that I've noticed about you too is there's this just deep level of respect for other people.
Sure.
And it seems to me like your brand out in the world is like a way to build a relationship. Because Noguchi also became a brand.
Yes.
You know, sort of a one-word brand.
Yeah. By virtue of the lamp. Like the lamp became the product,
absolutely,
the brand
Akari
of that.
is a big part of that.
Sure.
Yeah. And him trying to figure out over time, like whether to put his name on it and how to put his name on it, and that changed over time. And
I used to think that a lot too, like where does my name go? But see, then that's, like if it's the branding of the branding, like if it's a Futura Laboratories thing, well then there's no doubt, there's my logo. You know, just like I was drawn to simple logos like Coca-Cola, IBM, like whatever was my childhood association with design and a kind of cleanliness. Well, that spilled over into graffiti with the Futura tag. And so I kind of share that design aesthetic, I think. But rather than art, fine art, something more creative in this sense, painting, if you will, I also still like functional everyday things that someone could actually have use for in the real world.
But I think there's, you know, maybe there's still a stereotype out there that putting your name on something is like a form of arrogance or obtrusiveness. But the way that you do it, it seems the total opposite of that to me.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want that to be the perception, you know, although sure, I mean, the whole thing is so you know, the whole graffiti history and the you know, search for identity and claim to fame or whatever you're looking for. It's extremely egotistical and like almost like narcissistic. But I reject that too, because I know like I'm not doing it now 50 years later for the reasons I was doing it when I was age 15.
Yeah.
You know, when I was young and kind of ignorant and just clutching and wanting to find acceptance in a larger group. And then ultimately maturing into someone who could take a leadership role and then maybe help benefit some of the other guys that are, gals, obviously anyone, who's part of my story and how I could help. And yeah, like as far as how I even run the Futura Laboratories, social media or whatever, you know, it's all very diplomatic and it's a lot of sharing there and recognition of other people. And because once again, it isn't just about me and, you know, and I feel it's only fair to give recognition, you know, say kind words, you know, be positive, and you know, because we also know we do live in a kind of a, you know, there's this.
The world needs it.
Yeah, it does, and you know, so I've always been on a quest to pump the positivity out there because you know we've kind of been to see a negative sometime, and that's just not, you know. I mean, I just won't accept that. Like, I will always defer to saying something kind rather than saying something, you know, unkind. You know, I keep that to myself, more or less.
It's funny in a way that connects just sort of metaphorically to the lamps, because the whole idea of the lamp, or what excited Noguchi so much about Akari, is that you're putting a little sun in somebody's life.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, and think about, well, I mean, America is a huge country and, you know, big spaces, but if you think about Japan and, you know, how kind of small all those spaces are as well. So the power of like one beautiful lamp in the home, in the dwelling, whatever that is it a home? Is it an apartment? You know, I mean, some of my Japanese friends, you know, living in a space much smaller than this room right here.
Right, like 200 square feet. What do you do?
So it would be nice to have a cool little lamp that's kind of your sun, I think. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Some people describe it, it's like each one is like a little expanding universe. This one is fantastic because you've painted it to be well explained, kind of what you were thinking about.
Yeah, well, this was the one, so, you know, I was talking about 3D printing and whatever, so these are some of my gear shapes that I've incorporated in my work. And so for this one, I printed out some gears that I wound up making into a reverse stencil, like a mask. And I thought that would be interesting. And the other one, obviously, over there has the same kind of effect. But this was just at the moment when all of this was happening. I was involved in some 3D printing things too. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe that could be interesting. And you know, so I just, once again, I'm kind of spontaneous as well when things are happening. And, you know, it's like, oh, hey, give me that stick, give me that whatever. Like, you know, anything within my reach or, you know, something floats by and sounds reasonable. It's like, oh, yeah, come on, let's try that. So, but yeah, I mean, I was saying people were commenting on this one. Oh, the Death Star, you know, people making some kind of a Star Wars reference. And it's funny too because it's pretty much black with a very, very, very small amount of red, like, which I think was near his signature up there.
That's
so,
right, yeah.
You know, that's the thing too. It's like the signatures were actually kind of in a red text. So just to match that, I think I spilled a little red nearby and let it kind of just dissipate. But yeah.
You were telling me when I was in the studio with you a really interesting story about the way you do circles.
Yes.
And you were sort of hoping or thinking that maybe you'd be able to figure out a way to do your circles on these.
Yeah.
But in the end, it really wasn't possible.
No, it wasn't possible because of all the framework of the lamps themselves. Well, you know, all of these independent metallic, you know, kind of.
The ribs.
The ribs.
Yeah, they're bamboo.
So yeah, okay, wow, they're bamboo.
Yeah.
So all those bamboo ribs are inhibitors to my ability to paint, you know. Ultimately, for any of that kind of stuff, I'm gonna need a flat surface, right? So right away, most of the lamps, I mean, obviously not that one, but then that one I was like, no, I'm gonna do that with. But then everything else pretty much has the ribs. I mean, you know, to me, it's just this question of like, you know, all of it is practice and control and repetition and everything. But, you know, by just the nature of spray paint, you know, one needs to move around. It's a bit physical. It's not Pollock, but it's physical painting in a sense. But yeah, I was always fascinated too with the control. It's about control as well, right? So, yeah. And yeah, I guess if you could make a unmarked freestyle circle, well, if you could tell your mind and arm and everything to kind of do that and effectively do it, well then yeah, you could tell your mind to kind of basically do anything at that point. And even as a kid, I used to be really good at, you know, kind of looking at something and then trying to copy it. But then I kind of even abandoned that early stuff I used to do to just say, no, you know, like, I mean, because in a sense, all you're doing is really copying something. And even, you know, as a technique, I don't know, you know, I'd rather come up with another technique. So I abandoned whatever I was initially, and this is, I think, when I was in the high school level. But yeah, I guess I wound up becoming the abstract artist from the graffiti school in New York.
Well, and what you saw around the city. I mean, I remember you talking about, this is maybe my favorite of the lanterns, because yes. You often incorporate into your paintings crane towers.
I do.
Of one sort or another.
Yeah, it's a big icon for me in my work. And this just answered a list, kicked off a lot of boxes for me. One, and it was almost a structure like that. And two, though, there's just something wonderful about the form of this thing, and you know, even in the sense of how I painted it, as it was like an accordion almost.
You painted it horizontally.
Yeah, I had it tied that way. It was the only one, because in order for me to do these lines, I needed the thing sideways. So yeah, we had it strung that way when I painted it. It was the only one we did.
Like a girder.
Yes, absolutely.
How did you realize, or did you, the second you saw it unfolded, did you realize that it would make like a perfect girder-looking structure?
Not until we actually put the whole thing together, and you could see actually, you know, like you could tell what it was. And then I said, oh wow, you know, if I can just stay within this, because once again, it's not latticing, but it's a bit of that kind of triangulation stuff that this particular lamp, obviously, you know, it's just all about that, so.
It's a really nice synthesis of an image of yours and a structure of Noguchi's, and they just kind of marry perfectly.
It just worked, exactly.
It toughens this one up in a really nice way.
Yeah, I mean, normally you would imagine, I mean, it would seem relatively pristine, right, with all that black on it, but maybe it does toughen it up a bit.
I love it, and I love the way that the way these are made, the bamboo ribs.
Yes.
You have a length of bamboo, but it's only so long, and then you get to the end of it, and then you have to tie on another one. So all of these little dots that you feel, they're almost like Morse code in a way, physical Morse code in the lamp, is where the next length of bamboo is tied.
So these are where they've been tied together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this must have over 60, 70 ribs in it.
It is really complicated, this one. Yeah. So,
no doubt.
You know, craftsmen, it can take weeks to make one of these.
Amazing.
More complicated ones.
Amazing.
So we're here, it's still the middle of the pandemic, we're wearing masks,
Yes, we
we're
are.
both trying to be good citizens, that's
are.
important.
We are.
But we are so grateful for the show, we're so thankful. Thank you for coming in to do this with us today.
Of course.
And we're gonna be collaborating some more, I think.
I can't
And
wait.
people should keep their eyes out for that as well.
All right,
Yes,
well, thank you,
Albo.
of course, and arigato to Noguchi-san and everyone here. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.